Hi, Paul.
Right, how's it going?
Oh, the throat's still a little.
Yeah.
I won't be singing tonight.
No? Oh, well.
The thing that drives me on most, and this is interesting because I do have cancer, is that I don't want to start looking backwards.
Lining up well? Yeah. You up the height? All good there?
I always want something coming up. I always want to have something in front of me that I can do well.
How's that feeling today, all right?
That's okay, yeah.
All right, Mike, do you want the music on or off today?
Oh, yeah, leave the music on.
All right, Mike's on the bed. Nice on nice. FSD is good. Here we go, we won't be long.
Okay. I'll be here.
What a life. What a life he's had. Amazing.
About 20 or 30 minutes ago, there was quite an explosion here, as you can see.
He carved out a niche in television which no one had occupied before.
Welcome to A Current Affair.
He brought tough standards to it. He produced a top-rating program, and he's a one-off.
You could have been fighting with your parliamentary colleagues.
On an empty stomach?
So I'm under a little bit of pressure, of course, to eradicate that cancer and preserve a very famous voice.
I didn't realise how important his voice was to him until he got throat cancer. In the short term, it was the thought of losing his voice that really upset him.
There we go.
It broke me up because I could see that he was saying, I'm going to fight. I've got another fight on, Terry, but I'm ready for it.
Still up, so don't jump?
Yeah, I won't jump. Might fly.
No, that's what worries me, you wouldn't.
It's over 12 months now since he's been diagnosed with cancer, and I've been incredibly proud of him, the way that he has taken it on. Not asking the whys and why me and going through that.
Got a kiss for that. Yeah, I've been making rock Yeah.
He's still a mystery to me in many ways. He's very private, so even when he loves you and is close to you, you don't necessarily know always what's going on inside of him.
He's taking in all his audience.
Yeah, he loves it. Don't know who he gets it from, Dad.
We know he loves his family, and we know that he's always been determined to prove himself.
He just defaults to happy.
Yeah.
That's his.
That's beautiful. You're a lucky boy.
Dad's a curious character to me, and that's coming from someone that's probably one of his closest confidants, and I don't know what makes him tick.
It's making me want to dance.
My relationship with my mother got off to a rocky start. I was born with a blockage between my stomach and my bowel, and I couldn't take in any of her milk. My father believed the doctors that I was going to die that night, so he went to church and prayed, and he offered God a deal that if he saved my life, that he would usher me into the priesthood. He would offer me as a priest.
We were a typical Catholic family, brought up in the doctrines of the faith, and we practiced it religiously, pardon the pun, but we went to church every Sunday, whether we liked it or not. All the boys were altar boys, so we were very much entrenched within the Catholic Church.
When I was about 10, Dad said, I'm going to send you up to Bindoon for a while. And I'd been there with him. I knew he liked this place. It was a Catholic orphanage, as far as I understood. And I couldn't understand why I would be sent to an orphanage. I said, why, Dad? And he said, you need to toughen up. I still don't know why my father thought I needed to toughen up. But I did toughen up. You know, it changed me. They were kids from institutions, they were kids from the streets, and they were tough. These kids kept getting into me. I was terrified. Every kid there had to have a job. My job, sounds funny, but I was the assistant rabbit trapper. These kids that were harassing me and bashing me came to me one morning and said, why don't we go shooting tomorrow? Because they knew that I was one of the few kids who had access to the rifle. And one of them said, I'll have the first shot. But I already had a bullet in the chamber, and I just aimed it in front of his feet, and they bolted. And I saw where they went. They all ran behind a tree, and I called their names out. I was flicking bullets back into the rifle as fast as I shot them. And I fired a shot into each tree and called out the name of the kid behind the tree. And somehow that just seemed normal in that violent atmosphere that I was exposed to, and the fear that I had. That's what I did.
Mike came back a little bit tougher from that experience at Bindoon. He did come back different.
Now, the things that we said when we became a government, that we were going to throw off the stigma of racism which had descended on our country over a period of years.
Dad was a senator representing Western Australia, and he's away in Canberra a lot of the time. And so Mum, on her own, was bringing up 6 kids. It fell to Michael to assist her in managing the family.
Do you see career as a trouble spot?
Well, it's one of the 10 spots of the world.
Dad had a considerable influence on me. He took me to political meetings when I was very young. I went to John Curtin's funeral and I sat on Ben Shifley's knee, and Gough Whitlam watched me play football, and so I guess by osmosis, if nothing else, I was learning about politics.
Michael definitely wanted to be a priest. We all knew that. However, he got to his teenage years and the girls distracted him, and he realised that the two didn't go together, so the girls won out.
After school, I had spent 1 year in the public service, and that was just torture. And then I saw cadetship in journalism. And when I first walked into the Daily News newsroom, phones were going and people were running, because I went in there at a time when deadlines were approaching. And before I even had a job, my first job, I thought, this is exciting. It worked out. I got a job on The Age and got a lot of opportunities with The Age.
I was a police roundsman for The Age, and I'd actually seen him in the reporter's room, and even then he had great presence. Police Rounds was a very wild and woolly place, really. It was part of police headquarters, but you wouldn't have known, because there was drinking went on, there was gambling went on, there was brawling went on, etc. And I think Mike absorbed the atmosphere. I loved the atmosphere of it all. Joan actually came to Police Rounds once. That's the first time I met her. She was a Miss Australia. He was a very handsome young Mike Willesee. Very charming, very debonair, and obviously going places. And they married in 1965.
I was mad keen on football, and I was okay. And I sort of realised that I was caught between journalism and football.
He was passionate, but he was also, I think, realistic enough to know that while he would have liked to have been a champion footballer, it wasn't going to happen. But he could be a champion journalist.
Mike and I started in television together some 50 years ago on probably the craziest current affairs program that could be invented. Crazy because This Day Tonight decided to break every rule in the book.
There was movement at the station. The word had got around that the cult from old regret had got away.
The question of parliamentarians' phones being tapped came to some sort of head here today.
This Day Tonight was just magnificent for me because the timing was right. It was a bold, brave, new program, and I happened to be there at the right time and in the right place, Canberra. This Day Tonight gave me a flying start.
With jet transport, he can be in a different city every day. It means constant movement.
He was a natural.
Hypnotist Frank Johnson.
He was serious, but he always had a twinkle in his eye. He could just hold the audience, and you knew that here was a guy who was really good at interviewing.
Mr. Gordon, you've appointed Mr. Lynch to the Army portfolio at a very young age, at a time when our Army is fighting a war. Do you have fears about this appointment?
I don't think so. I think...
He can cut through the bullshit. He has a wonderful detection meter, and I think his father gave him an appreciation of the practice of politics without necessarily an affection for the execution of it.
America, this July the 4th, is a nation at odds, particularly over Vietnam.
No, I would not agree.
In one particular week, I drew complaints from the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister for Defence, and the Leader of the Opposition. As a result of that, I went across to Four Corners, which then was a very poor rating program.
I've spent the last 4 weeks in Vietnam with cameraman David Brill and sound recordist Bob Sloss. Here is our report.
It's a sunny day in Saigon. Hope it's good where you are. This is O.C. Smith.
Vietnam was the big story of my era. Suddenly, I was in journalism, I was in the press gallery, and all around me was the Vietnam War. The protest marches, the arguments in the pubs, and I wanted to get to Vietnam.
We were both pretty young when we first went, so it was all pretty new. And it was very, very frightening and exciting, and the power, the Americans, the invasion of the Americans, the machinery, the helicopters. It was an amazing experience to cover this as a young man.
Between us and the hill is a small Cambodian village. The villagers are frightened. They have no way of knowing they are not the targets.
Vietnam was dangerous at times. I have asked myself, am I attracted by the danger? But I think I'm being honest to myself in saying that I'm attracted to the best stories. Vietnam was the best story of an era.
The helicopters are the lions of this jungle, but at a price. The Americans have lost nearly 2,000.
You just say, Mike, do you want to do a piece to carry anything? Pick up the camera, slate, and away he would go. Not just the words, but the presence. He was very, very natural. It was none of this thing that we can get carried away with in television of ego or presentation. It was just the way he was.
This terrorist attack came after a lull of 1 week. As yet, we haven't determined exactly what it was. It could have been plastic, it could have been grenades.
The adrenaline would get going, and then after we got it all done, he'd just sit, have a drink, maybe, or not, and maybe a cigar. He did like his own company, and he'd be in his own thoughts. What they were, I don't know. But there was that side of Mike. And I don't think it was shyness, not in my opinion. I mean, Mike is the most confident man, consistently, that I've ever met in my life.
Dad has made some really bold moves throughout his career that have propelled him upwards. For example, as a 29-year-old marching into Clyde Packer's office at Channel 9 and demanding to produce his own nightly current affairs show. Not only had that never happened on commercial television before, but Dad had never even produced a story himself before.
Welcome to a current affair.
Clyde offered me a job. I said, no, I don't want a job anymore, Clyde. I want to run my own program. He said, all right, can you produce a program? I fibbed a little bit and said, yes, I'd never run a program. So Clyde gave me an opportunity to run my own program and a flying start in commercial television.
Serious crime in New South Wales was very much higher than published figures indicated.
What Mike did was take This Day Tonight as a sort of a basis and then build on it and make it more commercial.
Journos in those days were traditionally not businessmen. They were journalists. They asked questions, they wrote stories. Michael combined the two and did it very well.
You seemed almost a little bit reluctant when I asked you to give us a look at the ensemble.
Well, I really don't think the crown and sceptre suit my pantsuit.
I wanted to do serious stuff on it, but also to balance it. And I was always looking for a Paul Hogan. And when I found him on a talent show on television, I just knew immediately he was the guy.
Thanks for coming in, Paul, and giving us a hand.
Hello, Mrs. Universe.
Hello, Paul.
Nice seeing you, Upler.
Miss Universe.
What are the particular qualities that you look for in a man?
I like a man to be strong on the outside, like you, and gentle on the inside.
Like me.
Keep out this mic, we'll come back to you after.
I asked him, where did you get the guts and the self-belief to back yourself in those circumstances and when you made those sorts of bold moves? And he said, on the contrary, I was always scared and insecure. He frequently felt out of his depth. He frequently didn't know what he was doing, but he was very ambitious and very determined. He bit off more than he could chew, and he chewed like crazy.
Yes, I read that article in Clio. Mike Willesee, Enigma, a quiet sex symbol or a dull man with thick lips. I read that.
My first ambition was to be regarded as a good journalist and to earn that, and to be called a sex symbol and be told that's why your program works. That actually was an insult to me.
Mike was always popular with the ladies. He was a bit self-deprecating. He didn't like being called a sex symbol, by and large. But I recall one occasion when he told me, Meekin, the difference between you and me is that I'm a sex symbol and you're a shit kicker.
All his wives were beautiful. But, you know, it's a downside that he's been married 3 times, but there's some great results. He bore some beautiful children, some fantastic kids who've done so well in life.
And Mike had 2 children with Joan, Katie and Michael. But the marriage didn't last, which was sad.
And I was really disappointed, and I was very disappointed in myself. And I thought, I'm just going to stay away from long-term relationships.
I think Dad was probably embracing single life after the end of his marriage to Joan, when a beautiful blonde Scottish model moved in to the house behind him. Very quickly, Dad started taking Mum out, but he was determined that he wasn't going to fall for another beautiful woman, so he wanted to keep it casual. But I think Mum had very quickly fallen in love with him. So before long, she had moved in with him, and then their relationship was cemented when she fell pregnant with me in 1975.
So we got married, you know, and so I'd done it again. However, that was a very successful marriage for quite a long time, and there was, yeah, they were very good times. And 3 more children came along, and everything was very good.
Birthday, take 1.
I've always felt that Mum and Dad were the loves of each other's lives, and Dad definitely says that a big part of the time he was married to Mum was like his golden years. It was the best years of his life.
Come on, give Daddy a kiss for the chocolate.
He lived in a beautiful house. He had a beautiful wife who took really good care of him, 3 little girls, and also to the public, they were the golden couple.
Stronger than it's ever been when you have a low popularity rating.
I've always had a massive regard for Mike as a reporter, as an interviewer. I think he's one of the guys who set the standard for Australian journalism.
There are clear and opposing factions in your own party. You have a resignation and 2 sackings from your front bench in recent times, and your position's never been better?
It has never been better.
Tell me about the bad days.
I don't think he ever regarded interviews as a form of verbal combat. He was certainly challenging, but he preferred to let people hang themselves rather than to go, you know, at their throats like a snarling Doberman.
I'm just a bit concerned about the veracity of this alleged contract. You say as far as you know someone signed it.
Well, it's certainly the...
You've raised it, you know, on a national forum today.
Exactly.
It was 1993, federal election. John Hewson, the clear favourite.
Last night's debate put John Hewson 1 step closer to the Lodge.
And then Mike Willesee produced, of all things, a birthday cake.
If I buy a birthday cake from a cake shop and GST is in place, do I pay more or less for that birthday cake?
Well, it will depend whether cakes today in that shop are subject to sales tax or they're not, firstly, and they may have a sales tax on them. Let's assume that they don't have a sales tax on them, and then that birthday cake is going to be sales tax free. Then, of course, you wouldn't pay, it would be exempt. So there would be no GST on it under our system.
It was a masterful question, and Hewson fell right into the trap.
Right, and
there's icing and maybe ice cream, and then there's candles on top of it.
That's right. Now, that's the difficult. That's what I'm addressing in the question. To give you an accurate answer, I need to know exactly what type of cake.
He didn't understand it from the point of view of the consumer, the taxpayer. He understood it as an economist.
Then, of course, we scrapped the sales tax before the GST would be imposed.
It's just an example. If the answer to a birthday cake is so complex, you do have a problem with the overall GST, don't you?
Well, the difficulty we've got...
I was living in America at the time, and I called Mike out of the blue, and he'd just come up from the studio downstairs, and I could tell something had happened. He was very, very excited. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I've just done an interview with John Hewson." He said, "I think it's going to turn the election."
It destroyed Hewson's credibility. I think his campaign was shot.
Well, this is the sweetest victory of all.
It was called the unlosable election, and he lost that 10%.
The Hewson interview was Willesee at his prosecutorial best. But then, less than a month later, he was under heavy fire himself over the so-called Kangi siege.
Tonight, the trail of murder that has led to a siege in a farmhouse in northern New South Wales. In a moment, my chilling phone conversation with the killers and the children they held hostage. I was driving to work one day and my car phone rang and I was told that one of the killers was on the line to my studio, and if I could get there in a hurry, I could do the interview. Even if you've got a legitimate beef with the cops, Leonard, it's a bit tough to go and kill a 14-year-old girl and 3 minors.
Well, I suppose you've got an argument there, but at the same time I had to be ensured that the police hated my guts.
He told me that both children were there and I asked to speak to them. I was later criticised for putting them in danger by doing that. Have you seen him do bad things?
No.
Did you see anybody get killed?
No.
Do you know that Leonard and Robbie have killed some people?
No.
So what did he do? He asked to speak to the children, who he knew were at the mercy of this murderous madman, but not just to speak to them. He was going to ask them questions that could only have further endangered their lives.
I know I asked a couple of questions that I shouldn't have asked. Under the circumstances, I made a couple of small mistakes. I think I've done a lot of better things. However, the fact that I had a hand in those 2 kids being released is terribly important to me. Of course, he may well have let them go without me talking to him, but we'll never know. I did ask him, and he did let them go.
This number 6 landlord has been running over longer distances, but his best form has been over sprints.
I eventually sold the Current Affair to the Nine Network, and about that time I started developing further business interests.
How are all the horses?
Oh, pretty slow.
Got any rising stars?
The rising stars are all the very small ones in the paddock.
The single most profitable thing I did was FM radio, a station called Today FM in Sydney, which I started out with a group and ultimately bought out the other shareholders. I did very well out of that.
Dad always maintains that the end of the marriage for him started the day that Mum came back from dropping Joe at preschool for the first day, very upset, and said to Dad, I'm sick of looking after everybody else. I'm going to start looking after myself. I think from Mum's perspective, it was his drinking. Dad claims that it was the disintegration of the marriage that really tipped his drinking into alcoholism.
After Carol and I broke up, I became aware for the first time that I had a problem with alcohol. And that was a shock to me.
The personal social lives in those days were fairly hectic. There was a lot of drinking. There was a lot of work. Sometimes one tripped up the other.
Stan Pryor's talent for belting out a tune on his trusty old cornet. I shouldn't be laughing, but I'd already thought of something funny to say, and it's part of this introduction. Could I start this all again?
Well, I was sitting at home watching and realised something wasn't right, and we all saw what happened. The unfortunate part about that is that he's done so many great things in television, brilliant interviews, arguably the best interviewer on Australian television of his era, and for that to happen, it happened. And it's what some people still remember so well, which is a bit of a shame.
That was soon after he and Mum had split up, and Mum took him to LA to go to rehab. That's been something that just he has to do every so often to get his drinking back under control. When Dad gets back from rehab, he's great. He's healthy, he's engaged, he's great to be around.
When I didn't know I had a problem, I was defenceless against it. When I did know the problem, then I could start dealing with it. And so I'm just so happy that before I was knocked down, I knew there was a problem, so I could deal with it.
But here in the mighty Amazon, there's a biological argument which says...
I got sick of presenting nightly current affairs programs. I thought I'd done too much of it. There were too many interviews that were just pedestrian to me. No challenge in them. I always wanted to make documentaries. It's just a better opportunity to tell a story.
It was the late 90s. I was talking to Mike about a tribe in southern Sudan called the Dinkas. To get into the southern Sudan, you fly out of Wilson Airport in Nairobi. So we were there before dawn.
I had a premonition, and I did not believe in premonitions. So when I had it, I couldn't understand it. I had this fight in my own head before I got on the plane. How do I tell Greg that it's going to crash? So I stayed on the plane. But did I believe it was going to crash? Absolutely. Not it might crash, could crash, it is going to crash.
We're sitting waiting, and it was just a downpour of incredible storm. You couldn't see the outside anything. It was just rain pouring off the plane. So I thought, oh, we'll sit here for a while until the storm passes, then we'll take off. But no, the pilot taxied onto the runway, the engines revved up, and off we took.
And when it stalled and just stopped for just one excruciating second and then started to spiral and go down, the only thought I could get out of my head before my head was getting buffeted against the fuselage was I was right, which is pretty freaky. Not even scared, just I was right, because that was dominating my thinking. How can I know this plane is going to crash? And I said my first prayer to a God who I didn't understand and whose existence I was quite unsure of.
And we just plummeted into the game park and we smashed into the ground. And caught up with Mike, and we sort of stood and looked back at the plane thinking, what just happened? And while Mike's standing there, he said, I had a premonition we might crash. And I said, really? I said, so what did you do? And he said, I just prayed. I said, God, into your hands I commit Greg and my soul. And I said, well, next time you let me know and I'll get out and film it for you.
The plane crash changed me a lot, but it was very slow. It still took me maybe about 2 years for me to actually say, there is a God. In my mind, yes, there's a God. And that's good for me.
We were brought up in a very sceptical, atheist family. So then to see him, when we were young adults, to then really go back to the church in a big way, it was a surprise. It's something that we don't really understand.
Hello, LA. It's Dusty in Bolivia.
Dusty, this is Ben.
One of the first shows I worked on with my dad was called Signs from God, and it ran live to air in America and was watched by 28 million Americans. And it was huge.
Medically, that's impossible.
And summing up yesterday, what would you say?
God was present. It was amazing. Miracle.
It wasn't a plan. It wasn't my ambition to be the reporter for miracles. I was led into a situation where I saw something that was supernatural. The easiest thing for me to do would have been to walk away from that.
It didn't surprise me because he was always unpredictable. And, you know, there was clearly a religious side to him. He's clearly deeply devout and, you know, that's admirable. I just didn't think it was an avenue for productive journalism.
About 12 months ago, I was getting sick and I had a lot of pain in one side of my jaw.
Fairly rapidly, we reached a diagnosis of a cancer in the area just above his voice box. Not only that, unfortunately, some of his scans at that time showed that this cancer had spread to the lymph glands in his neck and also to areas within both of his lungs. He tells me he smoked cigars, and if you smoke cigars, cigars are no safer than cigarettes, really. But if you smoke, then there is a risk of cancers of the mouth, of the throat, of the lungs.
Obviously, it was devastating. At that point, we didn't know how bad it was, but within a fortnight, it became clear that it was very bad news.
And the prognosis wasn't very good, 6 to 12 months. Welcome to our new segment, Health is Food. And we're brought in today from, where we come from? Perth, okay. And Colin's gonna cook something that will make me healthy in minutes. You can see it happen before your eyes.
It's not easy seeing your siblings sick. I've already lost a brother and a sister.
Is that going down any easier?
He does need to be cared for at the moment.
Bit by bit, I couldn't say day by day.
I'm his big sister, so I'll be there.
Thank you, beautiful sister.
There you go.
Thanks. You're the best.
Anytime.
I'm a lucky boy to have a sister like her.
Whenever someone battles cancer, aside from the actual treatments, the thing that really makes a difference to them is the support they get. Family, friends, just passers-by and other well-wishers. All of those things really help, and I think he's got that in spades.
When you face mortality, this whole idea of faith takes on a new meaning and a new importance. But I really feel that it was his journey, and for me, that's what faith is. It's actually a journey.
I went to see him and have lunch with him just before I came over here to LA to live for a while. And as I left the house, I turned to wave, and I had my phone there, and I turned around to wave to him, the final wave, before we got on the plane and headed off for a while. Didn't know when I'd see him again. And he flexed his muscle, he flexed his bicep. And I took a photo of it, and it broke me up because I could see that he was saying, I'm going to fight. I've got another fight on, Terry, but I'm ready for it.
In many ways, this last 12 months has been a very good 12 months. Another great learning experience. And, yeah, far more good than bad out of this.